Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Infrastructure Investment Inclusive Growth Scrutiny Board. I'd just like to remind everyone that this meeting is being webcast and that the link is located on the meeting webpage if anyone would like to watch it back. For the benefit of members of the public watching the webcast, members of the Scrutiny Board will now go ahead and introduce themselves. And I'll start on my left, and please remember to turn your mic off when you're done.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Asghar Ali for Gipton and Hare Hills.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Katie Dye, Killinbeck and Seacroft.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Sonia Layton, Guiseley and Rawdon.
Good morning, Councillor Andrew Scotes from Beeston Holbeck.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Mohammed Shazad from Moortown and Meanwood.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Michael Miller from Kippix and Methley Ward.
Hi, Isaac Wilson, Councillor for Wheatwood.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sandy, Councillor Sandy Lay, Otley and Yeadon Ward.
Councillor Matthew Robinson, representing the Harewood Ward.
Councillor Neil Buckley, representing All Woodley Ward.
Councillor Martin Ali, representing Gipton and Hare Hills.
Thank you, and I should have said I'm Councillor Hannah Bithell, representing Kirkstall and also chairing the board. Becky?
Becky Atherton, Principal Scrutiny Advisor to the board.
Lovely, thank you. Are you okay to run through items 1 to 5, please?
Absolutely, Chair. Item 1, appeals. There are no appeals against refusal of inspection documents. Item 2, items for exclusion. There are no items excluded from the public domain today. Item 3, there are no late items. Item 4, declarations of interest. Can I ask members to disclose any interests in accordance with Leeds City Council's Code of Conduct? I'll take silence as none. Apologies, item 5. Apologies have been received from Councillor Cooper, and for awareness, Councillor Pryor may need to leave partway through the meeting. And finally, item 6, would you like me to deal with minutes as well? So members are asked if they will approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of November. There is one matter arising in relation to minute 51, just to confirm that a meeting has been arranged with Councillor Bithell, Tim Taylor from Wyker and Ian Mitchell from the Pocklington Trust to discuss some of the issues linked to accessibility of city centre bus networks for those with sight loss. Can I ask members to agree that they are a correct record, or to highlight any amendments they'd like to make? Thank you.
Okay, lovely. So we'll move straight on to item 7, which is our work programme. And Becky, are you happy to confirm the items, please?
Yes, Chair. Sorry, just bear with. On the wrong page of my notes. The work programme is being taken first on the agenda in line with member requests. The items that are included in your pack include a draft work programme on page 17. You have minutes of the Executive Board from the 20th of November and the 11th of December. And then if I could draw member attention to page 49, which is the draft 25-26 meeting dates for this board. If members are happy with those dates, I will circulate them provisionally on Outlook invitations. If anyone has any concerns, please could you let me know ASAP.
Thank you. I'm seeing nods around the room. Stanley?
Yes, future next year the meetings will start at 10 o'clock rather than 10:15. That's the proposal.
Yeah, it was discussed at the beginning of the year, incrementally moving them back, so there'll be the pre-meeting as well, 15 minutes before that. It's worth noting as well that in our pack it talks about the pre-meeting being from 9:30, but we'll obviously be able to amend that back down to 15 minutes if we decide that's the way we want to play it. So yes, please, Becky, if you could circulate those, that would be ideal. Okay, we'll move on then to item number 8, the first of our big items. And this is the proposed budget and provisional budgets. There's a fair amount of talking for me. I do apologise to those having to listen. We're receiving this item as part of our responsibilities linked to the budget and policy framework. For the benefit of anyone watching, members had an initial discussion about the proposed budget 2025-2026 and provisional budgets for 26-27 and 27-28 at a private working group in December 2024. At that point, we were awaiting further information about the local government settlement. I'll therefore shortly invite Michael Everett to provide a headline update on the information that's been received since our working group. However, I'm going to begin by briefly reflecting on our discussions in December and update colleagues on discussions at a meeting of scrutiny chairs earlier this month. As members may recall, the 5 scrutiny boards submit a joint statement to the Executive Board in February, setting out our response to the proposed budget. That statement includes a page dedicated to the feedback from each of the boards. It also sets out joint conclusions and recommendations where concerns have been raised by more than one board. The 5 scrutiny chairs met at the start of January to discuss common themes that emerged from the discussions at the 5 December working groups. I'm going to briefly set those areas of common interest so there is opportunity for board members to comment. I'll also briefly summarise the points raised at the working group, again to provide opportunity for members to comment. We'll then get an update from Michael and members will be invited to make any further comments and ask any questions. And of course, Becky will ensure that our feedback is captured in the joint report that will then go to the Executive Board. That sound okay? Wonderful. Okay, so our board-specific feedback. So we discussed the service review, Leeds Museums and Galleries closure of Abbey House Museum, which is on page 184 and 185. And the comments that will be included are: all options should be examined for the future use of the Grade 2 listed building. Members wanted to ensure future public access to the museum's collection. Significant concern was expressed about a lack of early engagement with ward members regarding declining visitor numbers at Abbey House Museum. Members suggested that earlier engagement may have provided more opportunity to explore the impact of alternative marketing or investment strategies. Options to develop a meaningful response to current proposals and to do so with the involvement of the local community had been limited by the timing of the engagement about the sustainability of the museum. And we recommended adopting a general principle of much earlier engagement with ward members where a decline in the public use of an asset, service or facility is identified, with a view to maximising the flexibility of any response. The next service review that fell under our board was the Highways and Transportation Civic Engineering Review of Structures and the Highways and Transportation DLO Review of Structures. Members asked for more detail about the potential impact of proposed vacancy management and service structure reviews on service delivery and the well-being of the retained workforce. We were provided with examples of extensive staff and trade union engagement. And there were some other matters that came up as well. So Breeze, assurances were sought that savings would be delivered through event management efficiencies rather than reducing ward events. Affordable housing delivery, we discussed the impact of changes in the rules regarding the use of right to buy receipts on the future direct delivery of affordable housing. Leeds Museum and Galleries Trust, we welcomed the success of an application for charitable status and noted the potential financial benefits this may provide. Further information about the wider implications of charitable status was requested. And the Cultural Strategy Review, it's a lot of letters. We talked about the huge challenge of maintaining public access to the city's collection in the current financial circumstances. We supported a proposed review of the culture strategy to support a long-term sustainable city offer. We asked that the Scrutiny Board is engaged in that review as early as possible with initial consideration alongside our scheduled item on engagement by Leeds Museums and Galleries with groups with protected characteristics. Any comments from anyone on the discussion that we had and has been captured there? Or are people quite comfortable that that accurately captures it? Lovely. Okay. So the next bit is around the Scrutiny Chairs meeting on the 8th of January, where we looked at the common themes. So normally we'd include 4 to 6 of these, but actually if we choose to include all 7, that isn't a problem. So the issues that we are suggesting we include and the proposed recommendation or conclusion are: number 1, deliverability of the budget. So assurance was sought about the deliverability of the budget savings given the scale of the challenge, and that came up across boards. Indeed, all of these did. 2, levels of reserves. Concern was raised about the financial sustainability of the council's reserves, which the budget report recognises as lower than those of other comparable authorities of a similar size. 3, impact on groups with protected characteristics. It was recommended that the views of the Member Champion Equality Working Group should be sought with regards to the overall impact of the budget proposals on groups with protected characteristics. That was kind of linked to that intersectionality and the build-up of different budget amendments and its impact on people with protected characteristics. Number 4, third sector partnerships. Members reiterated the need to ensure the budget setting process recognises the added value delivered by third sector partnerships and the consequential impact on services and citizens of diminishing grant funding. Number 5, NIER increases. Clarity was sought regarding the anticipated impact of NIER increases on the cost of services provided by suppliers and the potential impact, therefore, on the deliverability of directorate savings. This was noted as a particular concern for services, including adult social care. Assurances were further sought about the level of compensation anticipated to be provided by government in response to this increased cost for LCC. Number 6, trade union engagement. Assurance was sought about trade union engagement in relation to the redesign of services and planned staff reductions, including via voluntary mechanisms. And 7, technical capacity to support business transformation. Assurance was sought about the organisation's technical capacity to support business transformation, which underpins many proposals within the budget. This assurance was sought in the context of planned reductions in overtime and a structural review of IDS. So they're the things that came up more holistically. Is there anything anyone would like to pass comment on in there? And if not, are we comfortable that they get agreement from our board to go forward as our communal response? Everyone have? Yes, Councillor Scopes.
Thanks, Chair. Am I allowed to make a general additional comment at this point? Yeah. So I support everything you've said so far. Just one other thing that struck me when I was looking through the papers again for this meeting was that I think we should note the particularly to sort of the investment in infrastructure angle, that the council's selling a lot of assets, and I think there needs to be consideration about the sustainability of that in the medium term, and I think that's something that's worth saying in this board. Thank you, Chair, and it's just a comment.
Yeah, so that would form part of our individual board response rather than this, but if people are happy, I'm happy to have that included. Is that the case? Yeah? Lovely. Okay, wonderful. Yes, Councillor Lay.
Money and finances is not my strong point, so I'll start at that proviso. All right. When we discussed this, were we aware of our settlement that had been... Because I'm under the impression, or certainly reading the agenda pack, that we've received a 34.8 million. Oh, okay. I'll shut up. But there is a 5.6% increase on what we thought we were going to get, I guess. And no mention has been made of that and what impact that will have on some of those things, like the museum and the bowling greens, etc., and whether we're going to use any of that money to perhaps reduce some of the proposed cuts. Just a thought.
Alrighty. As always, you are ahead of the curve, Councillor Lay. And with that segue, I will ask Michael if he'd like to provide us an update on changes since our December working group. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, you're quite right to pick up the fact that the report was prepared before the council received the provisional local government settlement. This was published on the 18th of December, and that did signal some extra resources to the council. In summary, there's a further £25.8 million was announced, over and above the assumptions that have already been built into the December Executive Board report. So, as I said, 25.8 million additional, but it's important to recognise that a fair proportion of that is one-off funding, so it's not recurring. So there was a recovery grant announced by the government, £600 million nationally, And Leeds will receive about £20 million of that 600 million. The budget report already assumed 4.5 of that, so that is an additional 15.6 million that was announced over and above the figures that are included in the December report. But as I say, it's important to recognise that that has only been announced as a one-off grant. So you know, when we talk about savings, we're after recurring savings which happen every year. So the base budget is reduced in effect. So this one-off grant, whilst it will help out for 25-26, after that it will drop out. So that was the biggest part of the 25.8 million. There was other announcements around children's social care grant and other social care grants of about 9.3 million. There's also some additional funding for homelessness prevention of 1.2, domestic abuse grant of 0.5, and then the assumptions that the December report makes about the sort of level of core council funding. That's the revenue support grant. The level of inflation being applied slightly differently. So that was a reduction of 1.1 to the assumptions in the budget report. But the net impact, as I say, is £25.8 million of resources. Now in terms of the allocation of that, discussions are ongoing and full details of where that funding will be applied will be presented in the February final budget report. But I think it's fair to point out actually that because of the level of savings that are included in the overall budget, there is a degree of risk there, and if you add on to the fact that as has been highlighted that the level of reserves that the council holds are comparatively low compared to similar sized authorities, you know, there is a balance to be had there in terms of how you deal with some of the risk that's inherent in this budget. But as I say, no decisions have been made at this point, and full details will be provided in the February report.
Thank you very much. I also realised I very rudely forgot to give officers and executive members the opportunity to introduce themselves, which is outrageous. Before I take comments, members, that information can percolate, while officers and exec members, please introduce yourselves. Thank you.
I'm Councillor Jonathan Pryor. I'm Deputy Leader of the Council and Executive Member for Economy, Transport and Sustainable Development.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Jess Lennox. I'm the Executive Board Member for Housing and Housing Growth.
Morning everyone, I'm Jane Wallen. I'm Chief Officer for Active Leeds Operations and Culture in City Development.
Morning everyone, it's Fiona Bolam. I'm the Interim Chief Officer for Economy and Skills.
Morning everybody, David Feeney, Chief Planning Officer.
Morning, Krista Jolly. I'm an Exec Manager in Asset Management and Regeneration.
Morning, Mark Mills, Interim Chief Officer for Asset Management and Regeneration.
Good morning, Emma Camillo-Price, Intelligence and Policy Service.
Morning, I'm Michael Everett, Head of Finance for City Development.
Good morning, Gary Bartlett, Chief Officer for Highways and Transportation.
And good morning everybody, I'm the Interim Director of City Development, Angela Barnacle. Thanks.
Thank you, and apologies for not getting to that sooner. Would any members like to ask any questions, make any comments on anything related to the budget? Yes, Councillor Layton.
Sorry, I appreciate this might be going back, so I don't know if it's the right thing to ask here. But actually, I know that digital transformation is going to be needed regardless of the increase that we're getting in the settlement. I had two questions about that. The first was, are we getting any external consultants in to support the rollout and the opportunity associated with digital transformation? And then the second one is, how are we making sure that whatever transformations we make from a technology perspective, we're not excluding any particular groups. So my concern in particular around accessibility, but also ensuring that, for example, the elderly may not be able to access digital services in a particular way, and we still need to consider all of that.
Thank you, Councillor Layton. The IDS, so scrutiny boards, for anyone watching, have very specific remits that we are only allowed to play within so that we don't duplicate work. But so IDS sits within our strategy and resources. One of the suggestions that's been brought up in other meetings is that potentially we do a bit of joint working and look at how the bits that do sit within our remit, because IDS is so cross-cutting across, as it says in the communal parts for the budget, so cross-cutting it holds up everything, that actually there might be some work for us as scrutiny chairs in our scrutiny chairs meeting to do around IDS to support the strategy and resources scrutiny. But whatever it is, they'll have to take the lead because it's within their remit. But what I'll do is from the from the webcast, I'll get your questions and I'll send them over to the chair, Councillor Asghar Khan, so that the right officers aren't here to answer it probably. Alrighty, unless any officers do want to pass any comments. No? Wonderful. Okay, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Responding to what Michael said there, I think, Michael, you said there were £25.8 million of grant. Is that correct, that figure that you referenced?
Yes, that's correct. Additional funding, yeah.
Was that up or down on the previous year's settlement? And in your opinion, given the purview of this board, did we do well out of the budget?
Apologies, didn't have the microphone up. I think it's fair to say that there's more resources being made available to the council than anticipated, and part of that is because at the autumn budget, when the government announced that back in October, they did signal additional resources to local government as a whole, and the council has to make assumptions of how that will be distributed. But it's fair to say that more of the recovery grant has been directed to metropolitan authorities than anticipated. So I think in that respect, then the council has done better than it initially anticipated.
Just to follow up on that then, so better than anticipated, fine. Was it up or down on the previous year? And I know sometimes the grants aren't like for like, but we can sort of broadly take them in the same remit, can't we? So we got £25.8 million. Some of that was for example, domestic abuse was cited. How much was the contribution that we got the previous year for domestic abuse, or was it a brand new figure that was coming? So of that £25.8 million, is that £1 million up on 2023 when we were given the settlement figure, or is it down, or where is it?
I think there's lots of different moving parts to the council's funding, because this is the additional, the 25.8. So I think to provide a true like-for-like comparison, I think we have to take that away and provide that separately. Yeah.
Great, so we can come back with that and circulate it to the board. Councillor Ali.
Hi, can you just explain why our reserves are so low compared to other like-for-like councils?
Michael?
Historically, the reserves in Leeds City Council, they've always been comparatively low. This is not a new phenomenon, actually. It's something that the auditors have raised over the years, but there have been efforts made over recent years to increase the level of reserves, and also there's a strategy going forward, not in 25-26, but after that. There's a table in the budget report, sorry, that demonstrates this. So there is a plan to increase reserves. I think it's 37.7 million is the level of reserves next year. So whilst it might be comparatively low, it is higher than previously. But in terms of why they're low, I mean, the council has historically been quite good at managing its finances and managing its budgets, putting in place action plans, mitigations, that sort of thing. So it's been able to manage with the level of reserves. But nevertheless, as I say, the strategy is to increase those going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Pryor?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right that we've got some fantastic officers who've managed to manage our finances incredibly well. But I suppose there's also an element of the levels you want to keep a reserve at is a bit of a political choice as well. And, you know, the less the reserves we're holding, the more money we're spending on the front line and less we're having to cut. I suppose there's an argument for, you know, you want to save that money for a rainy day. I would certainly argue we've had 14 years of a rainy day. So now's the time to try and build them back up again.
Thank you. Councillor Lay?
Thought there were other people in front of me. Thanks, everybody. Can I just narrow down on a couple of aspects? Business rates growth is predicted to be 8.3 million this coming year. That's a significant increase on last year's growth. I also wanted to just ask about, we're proposing to reduce the headcount by 242 full-time equivalents, is that right? How many staff do the council now employ? What I'm trying to work out.
Michael, have you got an answer to that? Otherwise, we can pick it up outside the meeting.
Yeah, I think, shall we provide the specific figures outside of the meeting?
Lovely.
So does no one in the room know how many staff we employ? As a total? I'm trying to work out how many staff we're going to lose, or once they leave, we don't replace. So as a percentage.
I know, because I've heard it said several times, that there's approximately 15,000 employees, but I don't know if anyone's resigned today or been taken on today. So I guess having a very specific answer might be impossible. But Councillor Pryor?
There's also a slight difference between the total headcount and the total number of full-time equivalents, which is going to be slightly different. So we can go away and get
Sorry,
that.
yes, I get that. Yeah. I understand the difference between full-time equivalents and headcount. Part-time staff, of course, someone who works 0.5 is one person, but for a full-time equivalent, that would be 2 people. Yeah, I understand that. But clearly on page 58, Councillor Robinson has kindly helped me, it says we're losing 242.78 whole-time equivalents. I just want to know what that percentage is of our workforce. I don't think that's unreasonable.
I don't think it's unreasonable at all to ask. I think we'd need to be sure of the figure before we gave it. So
fair enough. It's just there's exec board members, there's chief officers, there's interim chief officers, and across all of these specialities, and that no one knows. It's weird. I would expect a chief executive of a company to know. I know our chief executive isn't here, but I'd expect the chief executive of a private company to know how many people they employ. And these are senior officers.
Jane? What, Angela?
Hi, thank you. Councillor Lay, I can certainly tell you what we do in city development. In terms of the overall for Leeds City Council, I think it's approximately about 14,000. But in terms of city development, it's about 1,775, give or take any 1 month. So in terms of that full-time equivalent, if we work on the business of 14,000, it's about 1.6%.
And actually, very quick math on the calculator of an approximate 14,000 is also 1.7. So, for the wider council. Excellent, good. I knew that my percentage skills would come in handy one day. I just didn't realise it would be today. Right, next up, we have Councillor Buckley, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got, well, 3 or 4 questions, but they're all fairly reasonable. Page 57, on the museums and galleries item, I'm not going to refer to the closure of the Abbey Museum, but I just wondered if you could say a bit more about the pay-as-you-feel proposal, please. That's the first question. Secondly, I just wondered, page 77, and this is page 6 of the appendix, at the top it mentions the age and ethnicity of Leeds and so forth, and it says here, the city's economy experienced significant growth. And I just wondered if we had figures that would give us GDP, so to speak, for Leeds, per head. In other words, the city has grown by, say, 3% over a year. Has the economy of the city grown by 3%? And that sort of thing. Page 188. The bowling green efficiencies. I just wanted to ask on this one, actually, whether any thought has been given to asking parish councils whether they can take up the slack here. And page 191, this refers to the city signs. It just strikes me that I imagine this, it says here, produces road signs and street nameplates. And it just strikes me that in every ward in the city, there are all sorts of signs which have been there 20 years that say new road layout ahead, new development ahead, and they're all redundant. I could point to 6 within half a mile of where I live. And what happens to who audits the retrieval of these things, and are they melted down, or what happens to them? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley. The last 2 will be picked up by other scrutiny boards, but again, in the same way with Councillor Layton's questions, I will pass those over to the respective scrutiny chairs. So the bowling greens don't fall within us, neither do the signs. But the other 2 questions, no, I was going to call you Councillor Walm there, that was nice. Jane.
A promotion at last, Councillor. Yeah, I can talk about the museums and galleries pay-as-you-feel proposals. So we've explored a number of commercial opportunities to try to drive income, obviously across our museums and galleries service. And this approach, we reviewed the remaining 3 museums and galleries that we don't charge access for. And we looked at a number of models that other local authorities and other operators have in place. One is obviously pay-as-you-feel, which is the proposal we've come forward for. But obviously direct charging, setting a fixed rate. We also have membership passes, day rates, different ways of looking at how we can charge for admissions. We use the pay-as-you-feel approach because in reviewing other local authority approaches, this was the least impact on visitors and return visits to museums and galleries elsewhere across the city. And it also retains free access for those that can't actually choose to donate, but it makes sure that people feel able to come, pay what they can and come back and see other things when new exhibitions are on display, etc. So from a commercial point of view, it retains and potentially offers visitors a more flexible approach in terms of payment. It retains free access, but also has the least impact on visitor numbers.
Thank you. Any other comments from officers on those questions? Angela?
Councillor Bissell, I'm happy to, well, first of all, I can tell you it's 14,150 in terms of employees at the last count, so we can close that out. So round maths, 14,000. The second point about the GDP, Leeds City Region is usually the level that we would take it up because of the economic impact. That stands somewhere between about 66 and 69 billion pounds, of which Leeds itself would usually account for probably just over half than that, so certainly about 31 billion in terms of round numbers from memory. But I'm looking at Fiona and she's not telling me I'm wildly wrong, so we can certainly get the latest figures as we get them.
Yeah. I've got the latest figure on GVA per head, which was about 24,000, but it's 55,000 per filled job. Our dashboard is currently down as I'm frantically typing, so that's the latest figures that I've got. I can come back on what that looks like from the time series as soon as the dashboard's back up.
Brilliant, thank you. Gary?
Just going back to the signs issue, if Councillor Buckley would like to send me the locations, we'll see what we can do in terms of moving them.
Now look what you've done. They're all overexcited. Very quickly, because I'm going to close this item down and I've got one more person to speak.
Just to get this, so to speak, GDP issue out of the way, so I understand it, is increasing the size of Leeds definitely increasing the amount we earn per person?
I think, Councillor Buckley, it's a very simple answer to a very complicated set of questions. The simple answer is growing isn't necessarily as straightforward as then that linear growth into individual persons. I will look to Fiona, see if she wants to add to anything.
No, but you are correct, and it is more complicated than that.
Lovely. Councillor Ali?
Thank you, Chair. Michael, my question is just a simple one, actually. I know we've had 14 years of monsoon. We didn't find ourselves where we are. We were put in it. But my question around is the asset selling, the present moment we find our city in, and the published figures on the 18th of December, and especially around the additional funding and other fundings. What impact does that have on us as a council to maybe halt that or ease that, please? I want to know.
Who'd like to come in on that? Mark?
Okay, so I think what we recognise is our estate has been too large for too long, and it's not affordable given our budget envelope. Equally, service provision changes, and that means that we require a different type of asset, different assets in maybe slightly different locations, and certainly provide different services through those assets. So I think our estate is constantly under review. We've made big strides in that respect, particularly around the office estate over the last 10, 12 years. And certainly in the city centre, we've reduced from 17 buildings down to effectively 2. So there's been some really big strides made in terms of back office. We're now looking at some of the other front-facing service delivery buildings and looking at how they can better support service delivery moving forward. So I think we still need to go on that journey. I think noting some of the comments that have already been raised around, you know, the sustainability of coming out of buildings, clearly, you know, that and our asset base, full stop, that is something we're really mindful of and planning strategically, but clearly we've got to meet a budget envelope at this point in time.
Thank you. Angela?
And just for wider context, the capital receipt programme has been going for about 30 years, is added about £650 million into the revenue of the City Council, and has helped fund, certainly at the minute, work like transformation and other further schemes. So it's been an extensive and long-term programme.
Thank you. I'm going to finish the budget item there. Thank you so much for your comments, members, and thank you for your engagement in the working group as well in December. I think we've really given that a good going over, which is really important as part of the budget setting process. So we'll move on to the next item, which is the performance report. And this is the report we receive twice a year as part of our responsibilities under the budget and policy framework. It sets out progress against a suite of city and council priorities that sit within our specific remit. There's a lot in it, so I'm going to take the items individually, with a couple that I'll take in groups, and then we'll take any questions on that issue and then move on. If there aren't any questions on a specific KPI, please don't feel like you need to come up with one. There is a lot to get through, so we don't need to get too overexcited. I couldn't think of a good phraseology there. For each KPI, I will invite the relevant officers or exec member to make any brief comments they wish before inviting these questions. Angela and exec members, do any of you want to make a starter for 10 questions statement?
Thank you, Councillor Bithell. I'd probably just start saying there is a lot in here, which is why we've assembled all the chief officers to make sure that we could give you a robust response in the meeting insofar as that's possible. Obviously, we're supported by Emma, who has compiled this, and the last update we had was in June. There are some real highlights in terms of housing delivery and changes to policy that certainly David can pick up. There are some performance, certainly around unemployment and business survival rates, that certainly Fiona can pick up. And then certainly alongside Gary's area in terms of highways and transportation, the wicked issue about how we really do work towards Vision Zero and how everybody's responsibility that is to work towards. So whilst we're doing well, until we hit zero, we won't be doing well enough. Emma, is there anything you want to add?
Thanks, Angela. Excuse me, just to add, and it does mention in the report, that members will note that previously we also included measures relating to those introduced by the Office for Local Government, which has since been closed, and we have taken the decision to remove those from our corporate level performance reporting, so those aren't in there this time.
Thank you, that's helpful information. I literally asked that question this morning as to where they were. Good. So, exec members, did you want to say anything? No? Wonderful. We'll start then on page 201 so that members can find the right pages in the papers, and we'll look first at unemployment in Leeds. Councillor Scopes?
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Bithell. So I guess my question is, do we have any sort of richer data in terms of unemployment? So obviously lower number looks good. I guess the concern I have is I know a number of people who are in work but are looking for work because they don't have enough hours or the work is precarious. And so I'd be interested to know if we've got anything richer in terms of how many people are looking for work and how many people are on things like zero-hour contracts and things like that that make it difficult to manage their family budget. Thank you.
Fiona?
We don't have anything more detailed on that. We can look at, we've got the headline figures from things like the ONS. We can look at who's coming through our doors and asking for support and get figures through that. But as a headline level, no, we don't. We just tend to have that. And on unemployment, it is only those people who are actively seeking work who would be counted within that headline.
Thank you. I brought up something similar in Chair's brief around why we're doing so much better and whether that is hiding some other information. And the suggestion was that perhaps actually that would be something we'd like to look at, looking at, for example, those that aren't working due to ill health and that sort of nuance. And Fiona was open to that, I think.
Yeah, I'm absolutely fine with that. I think on unemployment, not so much around issues like 0 hours contracts and that. We've got really good figures, obviously, and the people who are unemployed, we are really well placed to be able to help them with the kind of services that we offer. However, what we have seen is an increase in people who are not falling into that unemployed category, but who are not in work because of poor health. So we have seen that figure in our employment rate, which is not something that is reported on in the performance report. We are, I think the Get Britain Working White Paper, which has recently been launched, and the Trailblazers and some funding that is coming through is going to help us respond to that. So there is funding coming through the ICB directly for around health, and there is funding that is going to come and flow through WICA, one for a Trailblazer, which we're still working with them on as to what the detail is, and then one which is through DWP that we're going to be responding to, that is going to give us there will be a significant amount of funding coming into this whole work area, and we will be looking to have some programmes up and running from April onwards. It's all moving very quickly, and I'd be very happy once we've got more of that details and got in place exactly what we're going to do to come back to Scrutiny and to talk through that.
Lovely, thank you. I was going to go through this action at the end, but while we're here, is that something that members are happy for us to look to put on the future work programme? Yeah? Lovely, good. In which case, we will move on, if there's no further questions on 1, to the business elements, which are items 2, 3 and 4. So we've got new business startups, number of business scale-ups and business survival rate. Has anyone got any questions on any of those? Councillor Layton?
Thank you, Chair. I actually just wanted to know what the main challenges have been for local businesses. What have they said around maybe why they've not been able to survive? Because I've obviously noticed that the business startup numbers and survival rates have dropped. So what has the feedback been?
So if I come back on some of that, in terms of the business startup numbers, I've asked the team to have a look at that and the programmes that we actually run, because we run them for West Yorkshire, a couple of those programmes. There is a little bit of support for startups across West Yorkshire, but it is quite limited, and it's been scaled back a bit. In terms of the feedback from businesses, the reasons people look to start up are sort of more around, there's a push and a pull factor, and actually the success of Leeds around unemployment and having lots of good jobs means that actually to some extent fewer people do actually start up. So that's on the start-up point. You actually can have a look at some areas, and some of the areas with higher unemployment, you see higher start-up rates. In terms of business survival, we've not done a deep dive into that. We can have a look, but we haven't got a lot of resource to be able to do some of that work, but we can take the sort of feedback from some of our own programmes. A lot of it is general economic conditions. It's not that we're necessarily seeing things that are worse than others. It may be more of a national, but I think that's something for us to take back and to talk to some of the people who've been on our programmes.
Yeah, I think I'd really welcome some more detail there. Obviously, we've got ambitious growth plans as a city, and we want to know that they're taking, they're having effect. So I take your point, it might be general, broader UK economic conditions causing it, but it'd be good to see the evidence to show that.
Yeah, that's fine. I think where sometimes Leeds businesses and sort of do have a challenge, it's less around survival, it's more around scale up. It's when they get to a point where they are big, but not necessarily having the right access to finance to be able to grow significantly.
Yeah, and do Leeds provide good mentorship for organisations that are at that scale-up phase, everything else? So it would be good to get more information around that.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Councillor Robinson?
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, a thank you for the data. It's really, really useful, and I'm really pleased to see so many officers using this sort of data to inform their answers as well. 2 quick questions from me. Page 202 within our pack, which looks at the number of new startups. It breaks them down across sector. I'm assuming that's based on SIC codes that are there. And is there a way to break it down so it's slightly more nuanced, as real estate, professional services and support activities covers a whole range, and for us to know which sectors to focus our attention on would be helpful. The second is on the number of business scale-ups. It refers to, which is exactly the right measure, 3 years of 20% growth in turnover or employment. That can be some very small numbers, 20%, and I'm particularly interested in those scale-ups where you're looking at 100 plus full-time employees, or the ones that are really rapidly growing in sectors which are probably mentioned in the industrial strategy. And rightly, there's nothing in here that refers to the industrial strategy, but perhaps for a future report, given what the government set out, it would make sense to see how we can use some data that aligns with that.
Fiona?
Yeah, that's fine. So first of all, on the sort of the sectors, I agree, actually. I think the SIP codes are not necessarily all that helpful.
They're shocking and should be abolished, and a far better measure. Well, that's me speaking, not the officers.
So yeah, I'll keep that comment, some of those comments to myself. There is actually a piece of there is an organisation in the city called the Data City, which have looked at SIT codes and looked at SIT codes differently, and they are actually, it's a Leeds-based business, and they're at the forefront of that. However, we've had to, in sort of considering what we subscribe to and what we don't subscribe to, not have our membership of that this particular year, which would have given us a little bit more nuance and understanding. We can look to see what we can do underneath these headlines, but the categories that come in underneath them, I suspect, they do have sort of similar constraints in that they don't necessarily align to the economy as it currently is. It will provide a little more, but not necessarily, as helpful as it could be. Okay. And
while Fiona's getting herself ready for that, so just a declaration of interest. I have done some work with Data City in the past, so I do know how good they are, but I should be clear in saying that ahead of my answer.
And apologies, Councillor Rumson, could you mind repeating your second question, if that's okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So it relates to the scale-ups that we're talking about there. So some of this, when we talk about 20% growth, and whether it's in your turnover figures or whether it's in your employment, can be very, very small. Is there a way that we can look at this where it's, companies that have got 100 plus full-time employees in the city, so we know they're sizable businesses, or ways that we can align it with the industrial strategy as well, because the government's identified the growth areas for the UK. I think that would be particularly useful for knowing where we need to target our support and have our conversations.
So I will take that back and ask the team if that is possible. I think it might not be in terms of the numbers, but I will check. But I think we certainly should be aligning and coming back on the growth sectors, definitely.
Thank you very much. Andrew, do you want to come in?
It was just to add to Fiona's response to say that we are doing some work with the Leeds Innovation Partnership about scale-ups of scale, which I think is Councillor Robinson's point, and also about innovation-driven enterprises, which do have the opportunity to scale rapidly for good jobs growth and good jobs as well. So hopefully we'll be able to bring that back here as well.
Thank you. At certain times in meetings where you realise the value of councillors coming from a real range of backgrounds, because I understood about a third of the words that you two just said then. But thank goodness that we have such a range to make sure that we can still cover all of the information. So we will move on to the information about housing. That falls under items 5 to 7. So growth in new homes in Leeds, number of affordable homes delivered, and residential developments built to required accessible and adaptable standards. But what I am going to do is, because we've got a whole thing on affordable housing next, I'm going to skip number 6, because otherwise I think we'll potentially get into the weeds of that and be muddying the waters. So, has anyone got any questions on 5 and 7? Number 5 starts on 205. And while you find it, I'll ask my question. So it talks about the slippage in the building, the housing growth, and then the fact that a bunch of them are going to be built next year. My concern is whether or not we have enough construction workers to be able to actually do the extra, in that what are they doing this year when there's less houses to build, if they're in order that they are about next year. Thanks. Angela?
Thank you. I'll start with that one. If I break it down into, I think there's 3 components to that. One is about the slippage of housing supply, which, because of the scale of what it's coming through in Leeds, is quite, for a technical term, lumpy. So if something slips, it can slip in big units, and I think that's what we saw last year. But that doesn't mean that those workers aren't on site. It just means, for various reasons, the building completion date has slightly fallen behind its anticipated target date. But then if we think about the wider supply chain and construction skills, I think it's been widely reported for a number of years that nationally we are probably heading towards an undersupply of skills in the construction trade, which will allow us to meet the ambitions of growth that we've set. And if we boil that right down to housing, we kind of separate that into a number of areas. One is about modern methods of construction and making sure we've got the skills to really adapt to that. The other is actually just volumes of people coming through the trades, and it's still been a viable option. Now, we're fortunate in Leeds that we have the only national dedicated building college in terms of Leeds College of Building, and we're working with them on a national programme about how do we really use that as a catalyst for Leeds to make sure we're at the forefront of supplying those skills. But I think this is a piece of work that is going to be ongoing for probably a number of terms of housing delivery. Just pause there and see if any colleagues want to add to that.
Just very briefly, the pipeline of people with the right construction skills is something we do have in view, and it is a long-term issue, and I think it's going to be a long-term issue across a number of areas. So it is not just today's problem, it is longer, but we are speaking to WICA, we are having those discussions with FE and others about what is possible around that.
And just to add to that, I do know that the leader of, whose name totally escapes me and I know her quite well, of Leeds College of Building, is having that at the national level as well, in terms of facilitating roundtables to say, well, what can be done with both DFE colleagues and also the MHCLG colleagues, so that we're hitting not just skills, but actually the impact of not having those skills as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a concern for me, having been a teacher, around our vocational education element falling away. Okay, any other questions? Councillor Dye?
I just wanted to come in on the back of that piece of work you were describing there. Those conversations that are taking place with Leeds College of Building, are they including things like looking to the future in terms of building skills? So, for example, engineering skills for heat pump fitting and that kind of thing that will address the climate emergency?
So I would hope so, but I'm not close enough detail to give you absolute confirmation of that. So if I take that away and then link that up, is that okay?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Lovely. I wonder if that's something SEAC could look at, actually. Any other questions on 5 and 7? No? I might just quickly break my own rules, actually, and just very quickly on number 6. Because I can. The Brownfield Housing Fund coming to an end. I just wondered if there was the opportunity for an officer to just give us an indication of whether we foresee any issues coming forward from that. Angela?
Thank you. I would say not insofar as the lead schemes are concerned. We worked really closely, and I'm very grateful to Krista, who led a lot of this work, in terms of supporting WICA and our developer partners in the city to make sure that we could access Brownfield Housing Fund early. And because of that, we probably got quite a significant chunk of the funding. And I think the last scheme was signed on the 23rd of December. Yes. So I don't think we'll have an issue in Leeds in terms of making sure that those construction starts are on site. I suspect there probably will be a wider delay across West Yorkshire, where viability is even more challenging, and WICA officers are working with MHCLG to see if there could be an extension of time.
Brilliant, thank you. And thank you, Krista, for the work you've done on that to make sure that we're protected from the potential issues. So I'll move us straight on to number 8, which is number of people killed or seriously injured in road traffic collisions. Any questions on this? Councillor Dye?
Thank you. Looking at the data on page 211 of the report, and then comparing that with a lot of the work that's described in Appendix 1, page 213 onwards, has the data been incorporated into that work? So where we've had accidents and people have been seriously injured or killed, has that informed the work that's then followed in terms of trying to make our streets a safer place.
Gary?
Absolutely. Certainly when it comes to the major expenditure areas, there's a very rigorous programme that's done on an annual basis to look at where the collisions are occurring and for colleagues to put forward recommendations as to the appropriate measures to be consulted upon and then introduced on the ground. So that's a very well-trodden path, if I put it that way, and been developed over many years.
Thank you. Is there an officer present that would be able to give us an update on the vandalism of the e-bike scheme and where we're up to with improving that?
I shall try and cover that one for you. Situation is that, all the feedback I have is that the situation has stabilised, which is good news. Having said that, though, there are occasions and locations when there are incidents, and we've had one recently. I won't go into detail, but the numbers of bikes out on site are reasonably static at a level that we're quite happy with at the moment, and then seeking to expand that in the sort of late spring, summertime.
Thanks, Gary. Councillor Buckley?
Thank you. And it was about it was about this e-bike scheme, but I wanted to ask a question actually, because we're proposing that this antisocial behaviour has cost such a lot of money that we're proposing that £1.1 million is transferred from the whatever it's called, Transforming Cities Fund, is it, administered by WICA, to the scheme. And it just seems to me that it seems here to say that expansion to 66 live stations, and at the same time 88 bikes have disappeared, 39 have been irreparably damaged. I realise this is a government scheme and government money, but it's all taxpayers' money, isn't it? And it just seems to me that 1.1 million extra, and somebody worked out that it was costing £22 from the taxpayer for every single bike hire. Is that right?
Gary, have you got that detail?
I'm aware, Chair, that there was a full council question recently on this, where some information was given. Yes, there has been a bid into WICA for additional money because of the issues that have been referred to. That's been approved and we're moving ahead. The business case remains very strong in terms of the projected use over the lifetime of the project, and that's why WICA ultimately were prepared to approve the funding. The scheme, the use of the bikes is encouraging and better than other cities that we've seen, and it's a real pity that there has been this ASB occurring. We're working closely with partners to try and address it, and obviously communities to encourage them to own the scheme as well, because they do bring benefit to all members of society. And as I say, their sort of average use is higher than some of the other schemes across the country. So I think it's right that we carry on with this particular project at this stage, but obviously it will be kept under review.
Thank you. I'm excited for it one day to come close to my house. I think it'll make a huge difference to me. I've now got sidetracked by bikes and I can't remember what I was meant to be doing. Any other questions? Councillor Robinson, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, I know how personally important the statistics around the number of people killed or seriously injured Gary takes this how personally he takes this matter and how much time he invests in it. So compliments to Gary on this, because he takes it very seriously, as does his team. On speed cameras and the fines raised from speed cameras, Gary, I'm going to get on my hobby horse here, which is that we raise this money, it goes back to central government, they perhaps give us some of it back in grant to West Yorkshire Police, but you not you personally, Gary, but you as your department and we as Leeds City Council, made that outlay quite often for the introduction of a speed camera. Can you claim that money back from the government where you make that outlay from the fines? And how can we make sure that more of that money that's raised from fines is ring-fenced to road safety improvements in local areas?
We do fund the provision of cameras, but we fund it via our City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, which comes from government. So in a roundabout way, it's all coming. I think it does work along the lines that as you're suggesting. There is very good partnership work between the districts and the Safety Camera Partnership, and we do work closely, and we do seek to extract more money for road safety projects. So having said what I have about this sort of, it is coming from the pot that you're hoping it would do, we are extracting as much as we can to do other work as well. So I think globally it's a good result for us, and ultimately in terms of the impact on road safety, speed cameras, average speed cameras are having a positive impact. And may I, Chair, just whilst I've got the floor, if you look at the table in 8, clearly that is the accurate position for the April to September 24. And I think there might have been a comment around, well, you're showing an increase there, whereas in previous meetings I've said we're showing an improvement. We obviously as officers see up-to-date information going through a longer period, and the figures for 24, as yet unverified by the police, indicate that we are in Leeds arresting the increase, certainly in KSIs, which is killed and seriously injured, which is really encouraging. But it is early days, and I've said this before, some of these figures are horrendous, but statistically they can change quite quickly, certainly if we have a very serious, nasty collision on the highway. So we're not trying to get ahead of ourselves at the moment, but unlike other areas, we are seeing some positive signs of improvement, but we'll clearly continue to report that back to Scrutiny. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Councillor Lay.
Thank you. And Gary, thank you for everything and your partners that you're doing to try and reduce the number of fatalities and seriously injured on our roads. There's some great examples of what the council's doing to engage and to move societal attitude towards mostly speeding, but in distraction and other of the 5 key messages, I think. Can I just ask about 3 of them, 4 possibly, because 2 of them are relatively new, to me at least. I know Councillor Pryor sent out an email a couple of weeks ago. Perhaps I'd like to know a little bit about the mature driver appraisal that we're part of, and perhaps early indications as to whether there's been any engagement or pickup of that. We also, for the first time in my memory at least, have a new SID. Actually, we have previously provided a SID, but we have a new SID, and we promoted that for the hundreds, maybe thousands of people watching at home. A SID is a speed indicator device where we stand at the side of the road and measure the vehicles coming towards us, speed. So we have we had some messaging around that being available to community groups. And how successful has that been? And the other element I wanted to talk about was Operation Spark, which was the supporting partnership action to reduce road casualties, which was primarily, again for those at home, led by the police, certainly in my community, whereby they would stop vehicles and check that they were wearing seat belts, they were they weren't on their mobile phones, they weren't under the influence of alcohol and drugs, they weren't speeding, and they had the appropriate documentation and insurance. That stopped, though. Do we know if there has been a subsequent West Yorkshire grant or initiative that is replacing it? Because it really did, the public felt reassured, certainly in my community, for Operation Spark. And of course, as I say every time when Vision Zero comes up, if we allowed a jumbo jet every year to crash in Leeds, there would be an uproar. But the number of people who are killed or seriously injured on Leeds roads equates to roughly a jumbo jet every year. And yet, the public doesn't seem to take road safety as seriously as they would take a jumbo jet crashing every year in our community. So, keep up the good work.
Thank you. Gary?
I think, Chair, I may have to come back and provide detailed answers to Councillor Lay, if that's okay, particularly on the mature driver appraisal engagement. And I'd probably just need an update on Operation Spark in terms of, yes, we have provided revenue funding to the police in previous years, but obviously with pressure on revenue, that's difficult at the present time. But I'll get an update and then I'll contact Councillor Lay.
Thank you. If you send it to Becky, she can circulate it to the board. Lovely. Councillor Layton.
Thank you, Chair. 20 mile an hour was rolled out across lots of areas across Leeds. I'd just be interested if you've got any data points to show the impact that's had.
Again, we will have considerable work that's been done for many years to roll out 20s, and there is considerable monitoring that is done. Again, I'll have to provide that level of detail outside if that's okay.
Thank you. I'll move on now to KPI number 9, satisfaction with a range of transport services. Any questions on that from members? In which case, number 10, city centre footfall. Councillor Miller.
There's a reference to footfall being down over the Christmas period in 2024. I was just wondering if we had any more specific details in terms of what footfall was down in December, or kind of that golden quarter specifically, so the last 3 months of the year, rather than just the kind of headline year figure, just due to obviously how dependent businesses are on that period. I thought it would be helpful if we could have a breakdown of, if we did have that number, what footfall was like over the kind of most crucial part of that year.
Who'd like to answer? Jane?
Yeah, we can provide that data to you. We monitor it on a monthly basis in certain areas of the city centre, so we can definitely, we'll extrapolate it from the 12-month figure and share that with you.
Thank you. Councillor Buckley?
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if you could tell me, it says here that footfall levels are down 13% compared to pre-COVID levels, and yet Victoria Gate Shopping Centre had its busiest year ever in 2024, and I just wondered whether those two were slightly contradictory statistics. And of course, it says here 13% down on pre-COVID levels, largely as a consequence of lower Monday to Friday footfall due to new working habits like working from home, I suppose, where everybody will take the opportunity to order online. So could you tell me about that, please?
Angela?
Yeah, I'll make a start on that. So we have key locations for footfall cameras in the city centre that we are just about to review, because they are based on historic patterns of movement and perhaps aren't now reflecting the patterns of movement that we're now seeing. And Councillor Buckley is right, certainly in conversations with people like Lance Securities who own Trinity and Victoria Gate, they have had a really, really strong Christmas trading pattern. And actually that footfall has been increased in certain areas because of how we have redistributed the Christmas market, certainly about using City Square. And then when we triangulate that with the station, the Leeds station footfall data that we get through from Network Rail, actually 2004 data was something like 40,000 more people in the station than 2019. So what we do know is overall in the city centre, our footfall is there or thereabout comparable with 2019. However, the pattern in terms of days and the timing of days has really changed, which is why we're going to be having a review to say, are we now capturing the right data? So if I was to look at the footfall data in the station, in terms of 2024, October, November and December, that was actually higher than the corresponding period in 2019 and actually comparable to 2018. And what we do know is we haven't had a comparable service of trains for that period. So you're actually getting more people using the train station and coming into the city centre on a train service that has reduced, which is why we now need to do a deeper dive to say, are people moving within the station differently? And actually then triangulate that with some other data that we have in terms of people who are visiting Leeds Museum and Galleries and other events to say, why are people coming in and what are they doing when they come? But overall, our retailers are reporting a higher, what they call basket spend, when people do come in. So it isn't just about the number of trips that people make. It's all about how long are they staying and what are they spending when they do stay. And also, if we overlay that with making sure that the city centre remains inclusive, making sure that everything that they're coming in isn't a paid-for event, so that everybody has access to the city centre.
Thank you. I've seen no further indications on city centre footfall, so I'll move us on to number 11, planning applications. Any questions on that? No. Okay. In which case, members are asked to note the report and identify areas for more in-depth scrutiny. So far, we've discussed the unemployment figures and doing a bit of a dive into that. Is there anything else that's come from this performance report that folk have decided would be useful for us to add to our work programme? Councillor Robinson?
More of a follow-up question for officers on this that might help influence the work programme, Chair. I think it was Emma that had compiled a lot of the data for this, and at the beginning we said that offlog doesn't exist. Are there any lessons that we've learned from the offlog experiment about how we gather our own data and how we can work with other local authorities and combined authorities on data? Because some of these can be quite specific to Leeds, and that benchmarking, I think, across areas can be really helpful.
Emma?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, in terms of offlog itself and the measures that were introduced, we did, I suppose, decide to get ahead of ourselves with that one and start incorporating those into our corporate performance level reporting. We were, however, aware that across the board, across the whole council, the indicators raised some questions, and then those questions were being fed back to offlog as to how useful particular indicators were and how comparable among different authorities. So those questions were ongoing in any event, and we did have a number of caveats with our reporting to explain that. So where benchmarking showed particular indications as to where Leeds was in relation to others, there was a lot of caveats around the actual reporting and collating and measuring of those indicators. And I should also say that a lot of those are either the same indicators we already have. For example, on planning, they were a couple that were replicated, so we still have those in our reporting anyway, or covering the same service area, but perhaps with indicators that we're more confident in ourselves. So in terms of the spread, we don't feel that we're missing a trick by not having what offlog had. And every year we do review our indicators. We do review the key ones that we report through to Scrutiny, to corporate leadership team and executive board, and open up those conversations to chairs as well to see if there's anything else that you guys would like to look at. So in terms of the benchmarking point, hopefully members will have noted that there has been some more benchmarking information included this time. Wherever that is available, we do seek to include that in as consistent a way as we can. that varies across our service areas as to what comparators we look at, which are the most appropriate. And there are pockets of benchmarking work taking place across the whole council. It is something that we do continue to review and look at to see if there are other tools we can use, anything else that we can bring in. So that's something that's a sort of constant work in progress for us, and we will continue to review this year as well. So hopefully that answers your main points.
Lovely, thank you. One thing that I would like also as a recommendation is that although it's been sent out to us, I'll ask Becky to circulate again that full council question response on e-bikes so that we've got that easily and effectively to hand. And if there's nothing else anyone wants to bring up, then I will close that item, we'll take a 5-minute break, and then head back for our final item on affordable housing. Thank you. Okay then, folks, thank you. We'll begin again. And I wish my old classrooms used to quieten down so quickly. That would have been good, wouldn't it? It's only your own time you're wasting. Number 10 then is our next item. And I am really, really delighted that this is here today, but also the volume of work that has gone in prior to this coming, so that we are ready to discuss it properly, so that we understand the issues. For those watching at home, there's been, and they have been mentioned, if you've been watching this Scrutiny Board as a series, they've been mentioned, these working groups and roundtables around training for members, so that we are really clear on the challenges of delivering affordable housing and how the funding and such like works for them. And the work that's come out of it, and the partnership working with partners in the city, developers, consultants, etc., registered providers, Housing England, I don't want to miss anyone off, but I also can't remember the full list, has just been incredible. And the response that we've had from people about it being some of the most important conversations that they've had really does need to be minuted, and I'm really grateful to all those members of the board that have given up their time in order to engage with these things, and also incredibly grateful to the officers, because I know how much work goes into when I have some sort of harebrained scheme and then you all have to do a load of work around it. So both apologies and gratitude. Just to update the board, Councillor Lennox and I were also invited to a meeting of the Chamber of Commerce, which we attended, the Property and Economic Forum last week, which I don't know if you want to say anything, Councillor Lennox, as well, but for me, I found it incredibly helpful. And we're certainly keen, I think, to continue building on these relationships. One of the things that they asked was if there was anything that we wanted them to include. And just to give you a heads up, I'm going to be requesting that our place efficiency officer, one of the things that I'm proud of from previous work was the precedent we set by having a developer put a soft play in a high-rise through planning, and actually being able to go straight to the developers and have place efficiency on their radar from the dawn of a development, rather than something we managed to achieve getting in, feels like a really positive thing to come out of it. Councillor Lennox, with that, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you. I'll just say a few more things. Completely echo Councillor Bithel's massive thanks to officers who've steered us through this year of really detailed development work on this area, both with members and also with, as you said, partners and developers in the city. And the meeting we went to last week, it was really interesting to hear the different set of language and angles with which the Chamber of Commerce comes at the housing growth in the city. I think I was quite pleased that at the end, one of the summing up points, or at the end of our section, one of the summing up points made by the chair was that she got a feeling that Leeds City Council was very big on affordable housing in the city. I was very pleased that that message came through strong and clear. So just really briefly to introduce this update. So we came in January last year with further information, and we're now bringing this sort of update to the board again this today, ahead of a refresh of the partnership plan, which will refresh it for 2025 to 2028. It highlights the progress we've made and the shared ambition that we have about our pipeline with our partners. Just a few points to pick out are that we've got a projected pipeline of around 750 new affordable homes per year for the years 22 to 25. And this is lower than on paper what our target would be. However, I think it's really important to reiterate something that was brought up actually in the council chamber as one of the white papers last week. Leeds is delivering more affordable homes than any other core city, and delivers more homes that are for social rent than the national average as well. So that's what our partnership delivers. I won't go through a lot of what I've got here, but just to make the point that as was explained, we've done a lot of work this year amongst ourselves, but bringing in the developers and the social housing landlords and registered providers across the city as well. And there's really been a sort of breaking down of any misconceptions or any miscommunications between the regen team at the council and council housing growth team and those developers who have invested in Leeds. They've bought land, you know, they've put buildings in Leeds, and now there's a sort of shared partnership on how until. I mean, you'll have heard me before banging on about how I believe social housing and social rent is the only way to tackle the housing emergency in the country. But using the mechanisms and the frameworks and the toolkits that we have had throughout the previous government, and then now looking at what the new government are talking to us about and listening to us about how to achieve the kind of affordability that we need in our area. The work that's been done this year with those partners and with members and across the partnership in the city has just been really, really fruitful and really important, and I think has equipped us very well to go into a whole new, a new set of funding framework, we'll continue to deliver as much as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to make any introductory remarks, Angela?
Not in addition, but to really echo my thanks to the team for how hard, and for members how have engaged and given up their own time to come to the training sessions and the developer sessions. It's been really welcomed right across the Leeds community about this level of engagement. So I think we're on a positive trajectory. Clearly we're nowhere near done, but we've made a really good start.
And Krista, is there anything that you'd like to add? Okay, in which case, we've got about 25 minutes for member questioning on any part of this report. Councillor Scopes?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like to start by welcoming your comments about the police efficiency. I think it's a really important piece of work, and the officer who leads that is a really excellent officer. And I welcome the soft play. I just also push on for other ages playing, whether that's all the way up to well, when my children are the right age, I definitely played in soft play. But I think we also need to make sure there's sufficient play opportunities for older children and teenagers who do need to play. It's just they probably wouldn't be willing to be seen in a soft play area, even if it would be fun. So I've got a comment, a suggestion, and a question. So I just wanted to start with my comment, which is on paragraph 21. I think it's really important that we recognise the affordable housing needs, and I'm really glad that's a focus, so thank you for that. My suggestion, Chair, comes from the training that you organised for us on Monday, and about how we should be making more recommendations. And so just under paragraph, under the funding, financing and making a business case, one of the notes C is around the need to reform the right to buy to a fairer system that'll impact on our stock retention and spending right to buy receipts. And I'd just make a suggestion that maybe we could formally either formally support that as a point or right to a minister. I think that's for you, Chair, but something around formally recognising that as an important step that we need to help protect affordable housing in our city, and as it's such an important issue. And then my question sort of links back to the previous item, section 6, which you said to ask about now. And I know I've asked about what does affordable housing mean, and I know there's like a way that we measure it relative to market rents. And I guess the challenge is there's definitely people in my ward where even social rent is really hard because rents are high relative to income. If you are a single parent, or if you have a family to support, housing stock is really, really low, and even affordable housing, affordable in inverted commas, is not necessarily manageable. So I just want to again highlight that as a problem, not taken away from statistics in the report, but I just wonder if there's any richer data around what would actually affordable housing look like in our city. Thank you, Chair.
Anyone want to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really key point on that, the how affordable is affordable. And obviously within the National Planning Policy Framework there are definitions of what affordable housing is and the different tenures that is. It can be anywhere from social rent to shared ownership to rent to buy. So there's a lot of different tenure products. And within the strategic housing market assessment, there's an analysis of those different products by income and how affordable they are for average incomes and lower quartile incomes in the city. So what we can do is we can kind of make reference to that and circulate that to the board so that you've got that information.
Councillor Lennox?
Yeah, just to say that point about affordability, I think this is really the next sort of national piece of work that needs to happen around affordability. We know from our from work that's been done over the last number of years, but included in the most recent update of the Strategic Housing Market Assessment, that actually affordable products set at that 80% of local market rent fall outside of the range of affordability for the majority of people in the city. So I think the government's doing a lot of listening. I think, as is mentioned, there is a response that's been submitted around right to buy as a reform. I think the next stage, and I know that actually people who are the local councils and also other organisations, Generation Rent, Shelter, other organisations nationally, recognise this as the next biggest issue. The fact that affordable rent really as a definition is not a usable definition anymore. However, it has enabled us to deliver such a high number, using that definition and using the funding frameworks that come with it over the past number of years has enabled us to really do brilliantly in delivering more affordable. And when I say more affordable, I don't mean in number, I mean in how affordable it is. It is more affordable, the housing that's been delivered. And those partnerships have enabled us where we could have built affordable housing. Actually, partnerships such as with 54 North have allowed us to deliver some 100% social rent developments as well. So the sort of tools that have been used so far, as they evolve into what the next, however many years looks like, that has to really be at the centre of it.
I guess it would, and this isn't necessarily for comment back, although obviously anyone's welcome to comment back. I guess there's also an element around it of the intersectionality of different issues, in that our social rent on new builds, for example, is 70%, not 60%. Is that correct? Because of the viability of the actually building the houses, which then links back into our right to buy issues, in that the houses are being sold. So those that would have therefore been more affordable and on the lower social rent are no longer there. And then on your point, you've got the 2-child cap, which means the bigger the house, the bigger the rent, but the less you're getting extra for it. So there's this intersectionality as well that needs to be dealt with, but not by us. Angela?
And just to kind of give you some more information on two other points, the affordability calculator always starts with a discount from market rent, and which is a factor of obviously supply and demand, and it's discounted back from there, which is why we have the issue about affordability not being on the basis of income. So I think they're the 2 points. And then just on the Council Housing Growth Programme, the 70% is an absolute maximum target, and what we really try to do is make sure it's the minimum rent we can afford to deliver based on the cost of delivering that particular scheme.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting we were overcharging at all. It just is the nature of building new houses and having to do it within a certain time frame. Councillor Ali?
Can I just ask for clarity? All these houses that are listed as affordable, are these all social houses, or are they a mixture of social and private? And if they are, can we have a split?
So, Councillor Ari, they are. There's a definition of social rent and affordable rent, but we would class it as affordable if it was ourselves or it was a registered provided product. So not necessarily us, but it could be one of our affordable housing partners.
Can we have a split between what is owned by council, for example, and what's owned privately? Is that split available?
There probably is somewhere. I mean, the council housing number of homes is about 54,000. I don't, on the top of my head, know how many is in the RP sector as well, but we can find that unless colleagues do.
We've got the data for delivery, and we can work this out for the last 10 years. So of the new homes that are being delivered, the 0.6 in the report splits that between the different tenure products. So that's for last year. We can provide that for the last 10 years. So we can provide that split based on MHCLG live tables. And then, as Angela said, we can also provide what the stock is in the city and where that's held, whether that's council housing or with our RP partners.
Thank you. Councillor Lay.
Thank you, Chair. Can I direct members and officers to paragraph 30 of 225, just so you know where I'm talking about. And whilst you do that, can I just first of all say thank you very much for delivering the 2 training sessions for elected members on affordability and housing, and just highlight the continued concern around the Building Safety Act. And I noticed that there's reference to that in this agenda, and the delays that's creating for buildings of height, which I read to be above 11 metres. But I think you've answered that. What I wanted to ask in paragraph 30 was that we've convened a group of interested partners and ourselves around maintaining affordability into something called the Leeds Mainstreaming Housing Affordability Partnership Working Group, under the leadership of yourself. It has 6 objectives on the page afterwards that much says, or many require government buy-in. How are those discussions going with government? That's a simple question, really, in the sense of, are you finding government receptive as part of their growth policy, or are we sort of not finding them receptive?
Councillor Lennox.
So what we've been able to do is the government has, you'll have seen, come out with a number of quite detailed consultations around this stuff. So the first one that came out quite quickly was the MPPF Planning Policy Framework consultation, which sort of gave us the opportunity to expand on why we believe that there needs to be reforms to how affordable housing is delivered. So I'm not sure if we've discussed it at this scrutiny board before, but it went through the development plans panel, and it's available and it's been published, etc. as our response. And that was the first one. There was then a sort of short right to buy consultation, and now there's been a more in-depth right to buy consultation. So what we're doing is we're feeding into these consultations. I've also attended alongside Leeds for Housing, lead members for housing from across various councils, a number of round tables with Matthew Pennycook, who's the housing minister, and Angela Rayner as well, where they have basically come to us and asked us what it is we need, and that started actually before the last general election, asked us what it is that we need, and we are now seeing policy come out around rough sleeping support, around some planning reforms, around right to buy reforms, that are the result of those conversations. So the dialogue is there. What I hope to do, and I've told the team about this, so they're not going to jump out of their seats, I hope to get Angela Rayner to Leeds to see how we are delivering, to see what we are delivering, and to hear what our limits are and what more we could deliver. I hope to invite her early this year to do that. And maybe we can speak with Scrutiny Board chairs as part of that, to explain to show how much work is being done on finding what the solutions could be to this delivery, and talk about and actually show her and show government what that looks like in Leeds. I think that would be the next step. But to say that government, just to confirm that government are really receptive to our ideas and to our experiences, and it's actually a lot of different councils as well. It's northern councils, it's southern councils, it's more rural, more urban councils that have come together, led by Southwark Council, a lot of it, steered by Southwark Council. So it has been more so than my experience before the government changed last year in this role. More so than that, there's been a lot of communication with government about these about the challenges of delivering affordability.
Angela?
And just to add on to, in terms of an officer perspective, MHCLG have been part of this working group, so that we're feeding it even on an officer-to-officer basis as well. primarily driven through the Leeds Transformational Regeneration Partnership that was established under Michael Gove, and actually we've got our next meeting with the Minister at 1 o'clock today about how we continue that. But really in terms of making the case about what is affordable in Leeds, because given the Leeds demographics, if things work in Leeds, the chances are they are scalable at a national level too. And what we are offering to our colleagues is please work across the industry here, because we can accelerate that learning as quickly as possible that can then be replicated, whether you are a city, a town, whether you're rural or metropolitan. And we've had really good involvement from MHCLG since the beginning.
Councillor Lay?
Thank you. I think this is more of a statement, but I'm not quite sure where it's going yet. But more of a statement than a supplementary. I think it's really important, and I don't doubt that any of us in this room don't think it's really important, but having a roof over your head is a universal basic right. We learnt from our sessions with yourselves that there are 26,000 people on our council housing waiting list. If we hadn't sold off under successive governments council houses under right to buy, we would have enough council housing to put those 26,000 people into council housing, and therefore we need to do as much as we can do to encourage this country to provide the basic human right that you should have a roof over your head. And so I congratulate you on the work you're doing, and please continue to do it.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Robinson?
Thanks, Chair. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend some of the training sessions, so I'm finding this discussion really, really useful, actually. Just referring to page 226, the planning, place and infrastructure element. Under B, the opportunity that mass transit provides locally to support place regeneration and housing growth alongside the development of a spatial development strategy for West Yorkshire. I wonder if the executive member officers could say a little bit more about this, because if you look at what happens in London, for example, when you develop mass transit systems, when there are new stops on things like the tube line, the house price goes up. That has a negative impact in what you hope to deliver around affordable housing. So we may be able to deliver numbers, but we might not be able to deliver them at scale. And how do we work that out in terms of supporting people to get to work as well? Because obviously we want to make sure that they've got a house that's great, but actually if they can't afford to get the tube to get to work or to get to a place that they need to, whether it's childcare or something else, that's a chance. So how do we look at that package around them? And a second question, if I may, Chair, which is, do we track the numbers or have any ideas of the numbers who sort of stay in social housing as well? So are we seeing people who use social housing for a little period or use affordable housing and then move on? Actually, it's a stepping stone. It's going to be a really nuanced picture, I know, but I'm just interested if we track that or look at that in a qualitative or quantitative fashion.
Can I start and break that down? Because I know David will want to come in about the planning angles and colleagues about tracking. But you make a really interesting and valid point, Councillor Robinson, about mass transit, and mass transit being so much more than just a transport infrastructure programme. It's about how do we get better access to key regional infrastructure, such as the hospitals in Leeds for our communities. How do we make it affordable in terms of transportation? How do we make sure that we're growing sustainably? Because in the MPPF updates, you'll notice that Leeds has now an increased housing target of somewhere around about 3,811, there or thereabouts, which is higher than what we had at 3,247. Not as high as what we delivered last year, but last year's delivery was a 1 in 30-year event. So we have to make sure that when we're putting forward sites for delivery, they actually can be delivered, and mass transit is a really big important part of that. Clearly in the first two routes, we should know what they are coming forward quite soon. So being able to plan for that spatial development strategy right across the district allows us not just to make the case for mass transit to deliver the first two routes, but to make sure that we're delivering a sustainable network. And you've probably heard the term transport-orientated development. TODs is what they would call them in the industry, and that is actually what mass transit is in terms of sustainable transport orientated development, which is sustainable. David, is there anything you want to pick up on the planning, and then I'll bring Krista in terms of the staircasing of affordability?
Thanks, Angela. I think you've covered the main points. Just to add, I mean, looking at the detail of this locally, Councillor Robinson, it'd be the Leeds local plan review that we're doing, so that will need to stitch in all of the policies around the housing mix, the placemaking locally, and the integration of mass transit through the city as well. It's not sort of an imposition that's coming from on high. It's something that we are working with the combined authority on to ensure that the benefits are maximised as Angela's described. Thank you.
Just on that point, on do we track people and in terms of kind of their tenure of choice and their movements? Individually, I don't think we do track people, but what we do track is trends. So through strategic housing market assessment, we'll track, every time we do a strategic housing market assessment, what the housing needs are based on the household surveys, which goes into that data and then says what the needs are coming out of that in terms of number of affordable, the tenure of affordable, etc. So that will provide the data of those trends and kind of whether we need more or less affordable housing. And in terms of Angela's point, just picking up in terms of that staircasing, I think it's, while we say that we do, yes, really need social rented homes, we've also got a need for the other affordable tenures so that we create that functioning housing market so that we can get people into shared ownership, we get people into rent-to-buy properties so that they can have that ambition to move on. And I think while we all know and we've responded to the right to buy consultation, what we've said within that consultation is we don't want to stop people being able to aspire to home ownership. That's not the point. The point is that we need a sustainable and functioning housing market so that we've got the right tenure products that people can actually move into so we can deliver more shared ownership, more affordable home ownership and low-cost home ownership products in the right place and the right types and the right funding, that we have that creating that functioning housing market for the city.
Councillor Lennox?
Yeah, when we will share, as was said, we'll share the consultation response and pick out the headlines of it, because I think really what's been really clear throughout all the work that we've done this year, and obviously through work that we already know about and already have already done in the council, is that right to buy undermines the affordability of all different kinds of housing. The fact that right to buy is there, and the fact that it's not that individuals shouldn't be given the opportunity to own a home. Is buying a council house off the council the product that is the right thing for our housing emergency and also for those buyers. So just really briefly on what you said about the length of time people are staying in social housing, I do not have the figures to hand, but anecdotally and supported by figures that I have seen, yes, people are staying longer. Turnover and churn of our tenants is slowing down. You can easily sort of account that to the cost of living crisis that we've seen, rent crisis that we've seen, COVID, instability, jobs, the last 5 years of the country. But there are obviously going to be other, we can find that data and dive further into it and pick out any trends.
Very quick.
If I may, Chair, yeah, it's not a question, probably more of a statement, hopefully supporting some of what's been said. I think it'd be great if the committee could see the SHMA, some of the trend data, if you could send that through, that would be really, really useful. I'm really heartened to hear what you're saying about that aspiration to own a home as well. I don't want to go into all the politics of some of the decisions today, but I think we should all have that aspiration to make sure somebody has a home and can own a home if they want to own a home as well. And on mass transit, to that point, I think probably Councillor Lennox, Councillor Lay and myself can think of parts of our ward where mass transit will not reach, and by putting affordable housing in there, you actually cut people off. You don't make them included in what's going on in society in the rest of Leeds. So I think, just as a statement for some of the work that you're doing already. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dye.
Thank you. I wanted to start with a comment and just a thank you really to say that I really welcomed the workshops that we did. I learnt an awful lot, and it was great to hear from providers and have those really key and frank discussions that led to me having a much better understanding of all of the issues that are involved. So just a huge thank you for that. And also on the back of that, I scribbled down in my notes various things that I thought for me had come out of those workshops and highlighted some of them before coming to the meeting today. So things like planning and the importance of getting planning right, how we all need to work together. Skills is a really important thing. And it's great to see that in the partnership working group priorities, those things are in there. So, you know, I think that's a kind of a shared bit of learning that we've all been able to take forwards, and I think will be really, really important in the future. Lots of people have said how important this is. Getting this right for the city is massive. So thank you for that, and for indulging me in my comments. So just two questions. One of them is, there is a statement on page 223 about having a huge increase in right-to-buy applications prior to the changes coming in. So I wondered if anybody's able to comment on where that is at the moment and what implications that will have for us over the next year. And then my second question was local plan updates. I know we've got a bit stuck on that, and I want to know exactly where are we in that update. Thank you.
Mark?
Okay, I will pick up the right to buy point, and then David can come in on the planning matter. So yeah, there has been a substantial increase in applications. So we've received 2,500 applications before the discount changes came into effect. That is substantially more than we would see for the same period. So over the course of a year, or on a monthly basis, we normally see around 80 applications. We in asset management and regeneration deal with the valuations of all of those, clearly working very much with housing as they then progress through the system. It's very difficult to tell at this point in time how many of those will convert to sales. Normally, you're talking around 60–70% of applications that actually then complete. Whether or not that's going to be different because people work into a particular deadline in this case, whether there's possibly, you know, it could go both ways. So we will see what that looks like. That said, we have now seen a complete drop-off in applications. They're still coming, you know, we're still getting them in, but the numbers are now, I think the ones that have come through in the last month, there's probably been, I think, about 20, which is, again, substantially less than where we have been.
Councillor Lennox?
Yeah, just on right to buy, we have also got information which shows that actually the majority, the numbers, the houses that we get the most demand for, or the most appetite for through right to buy, are the housing types that are in most demand for our waiting list. So family housing and single person housing are the ones that we get the most applications for right to buy for, and the ones that we've therefore lost the most of out of our council housing stock. And just what Mark mentioned about deadlines, it does remain to be seen how many of these homes will actually be sold as a result of the deadline that was in November. But what Mandy Sawyer and colleagues on the housing side have been doing is writing to people who've put their applications in and asking them if they will work with us to, because we have a statutory timeline in which we have to finish, in which we have to conduct a sale through right to buy. We're asking them if they will work with us, because we've obviously got a lot to handle in that timeline, and actually it's giving people a bit more time to get themselves ready for their purchase as well. So we are sort of working with some flexibility that we do have around that. That might mean that more are successfully sold, or it might mean that less are successfully sold. It might mean that people giving that chance, you know, if people felt like it was their last chance to buy their house, that will have been why they put their application in. So I suppose we can bring updates next time we come and speak to people, or provide updates to the board about how that's going. But just obviously the point that's not been brought up through this is 2,500, that's around 4% of our existing stock. if we lose 4% of our existing stock, it is going to take a long time to replenish that in Leeds, and it's also the case that it's going to take out millions of pounds in rent from the HRA over the coming years.
Thank you. A few questions from me. You want to come back quickly?
I do, please. I wanted an update on local plan.
Sorry, Councillor, just on, on that matter, we're taking a paper to our development plan panel next time, looking at the local plan update. The local plan we're working on is Leeds 2040, although we are going to have to badge that Leeds 2042 to take into account the time frame in terms of the overall plan period. As part of that, the evidence that we've been preparing through this work on the strategic housing market assessment will be incorporated in informing our new policies to give strength and weight to policies around affordable housing and what does that growth look like district wide. And the ambition is to go through executive board with a view to public consultation on the plan in spring of this year. So that's the point we're at. So there's an active process underway, and I have to say that the work we've done on affordable housing with colleagues has been very collaborative, and that's going to be integrated as part of the plan making process, which will give it material weight in terms of planning decisions once the plan is adopted.
Thank you. And just also to say that we were going to have the planning stuff come in April to us, and it will now be in the new municipal year for the same reasons of it being pushed back a bit. So some questions from me, if this is okay. The Guinness slippage, it would be good to hear a little bit about the main cause and the potential risks moving forward with other developments, which I guess kind of feeds into that Building Safety Act work as well. I would like to ask on the priorities whether or not, or what more is needed post our recent announcements on right to buy, or not our recent announcements, the government's recent announcements, and also whether or not in the Treasury valuing affordable housing as supported growth and recognition of the impact of non-investment in the public purse, actually whether or not the business case is being made for the health costs of not doing it, and how we can work better with the ICB in a similar way to the work Fiona was talking about earlier with employment and health, actually the impact of housing and health and an understanding of that. And I would also seek from the board our formal agreement that point D in the funding, financing and making the business case, I would like us to formally affirm our agreement to the recognition of the competing need to invest in existing homes for current tenants and new homes to meet housing need, and there not being enough funding to do both, and a call for a new decent homes programme. I think it would be useful for us as a scrutiny board to formally endorse that particular priority, but I'll get on to recommendations shortly if anyone would like to come back on that.
I'll split that into a couple of parts if you don't mind. So I'll ask Krista and perhaps David to take the Guinness detail of slippage, because it will involve the building safety regulator and changes to building control as well. And then I'll come back on the Treasury issue about the health cost in housing under the Marmot City approach, if that's all right.
Yeah, so just on the Guinness scheme, the Guinness scheme on phase 1 was due to complete this year, and that was 311 homes as part of that. The challenges that were on site were through the Building Safety Act and really working through the new stages of that and the processes of that, which has caused challenges in terms of kind of the building safety and kind of getting those regulations in place and kind of meeting those obligations. I think that's universally recognised, and through the workshops that we've had with Scrutiny Board members and a number of our development partners, the industry is saying that there's about 8 to 12 months delay in getting through kind of the new kind of building safety regulations. So I guess the Guinness scheme has kind of been challenged through that, and that's kind of what we're seeing. However, both phase 1 and also phase 2 now, which is caught up, are due to complete next year. So for 2025, 2026, you'll see in the papers that we've got a kind of significant increase in projected delivery for over 1,200 homes within the next financial year, because those two schemes are coming through, which is really positive to see.
Nothing to add really, Chair, just to say that the Building Safety Act, the key issue is the new regulations around tall buildings or high buildings. It's buildings over 18 metres, seven stories, and the key issue is about the requirements around a second stair core, and this has caused some development which is actually on site part of the way through, and in part we understand that it's coming from sort of the insurers of the buildings as well, wanting to make sure that they're compliant with the new Building Safety Act requirements and the requirements being set out by the Building Safety Regulator as well. So it's a key issue nationally, not just within Leeds as well. And I think it's fair to say that a number of construction companies are still getting to grips with the new regulations, but it is now starting to stabilise, I think.
Thank you.
So can I just come back in? I just wanted to say through the round tables that obviously the Act is really welcomed. So kind of the development sector and the industry have been saying it's not to do with the Act. They welcome the Act. It's obviously really needed. It's around the implementation of the Act that's causing the challenges.
Thank you. Angela?
And just to come back on the health and housing, that are inextricably linked. And there are a couple of points of work that we're doing, certainly with Housing Leeds in terms of quality, who are leading that on the quality of the housing, etc., and how that has a direct impact that we can ask our Housing Leeds colleagues to update you on. The second is the work we're doing with under the Marmot Cities approach with public health. So we've had a number of work streams with Tim Fielding and Adam Brannan, so in public health and in Regen, basically about embedding housing at that key point of healthy plan making, but also healthy delivery. We had a visit from DHSC only last Monday, where colleagues were commenting that the approach that we're taking in Leeds is probably a pilot approach that isn't really being moved as fast through the system as it is here. So we're trying to make sure that we don't think we're being that groundbreaking. So if we are, let's share that learning and let's move together even faster. And there is an end of 2-year programme event in June under the Marmot Cities. And what we want to do is to be able to say, well, what's changed because of it? And our approach to how do we quantify the impact of poor housing on the health system, which is an incredibly mammoth question, but we're trying to break that down. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to come back to you on that.
Thank you. I'm going to close this item down now because we are running out of time. There's a few different recommendations that have kind of come up within this, so I'm going to try and formulate them into a cohesive whole, and then we can agree them. So the first one is obviously to note the progress made by the Council and its partners in delivery of the action plan. I think that's been duly done. We are looking to agree to review the updated LAHG PAP 25 to 28 prior to Executive Board consideration later this year. I take it members are happy for that to come back to the board. Lovely, or to come to the board. And great that officers are happy to do that pre-decision. And given the success of the working groups that we did previously, our suggestion is that in autumn of this year, 8 months time, we look to do a sort of a reconvening of the group to kind of do updates, and progress, and basically just to keep that conversation going. Councillor Lennox?
Just to say, I think it's kind of mentioned in here, I think the outcome of the comprehensive spending review will be really informative as to what the next number of years are going to look like in terms of what we have to spend and where we have to spend it. So I think it would be useful to, make sure that reconvening is after we've been able to digest some of what comes out of that. June-ish? It's a bit later than planned, I think.
Yeah, so if we aim for sort of October time, that's probably the a time that would be effective. I'm going to add, based on Councillor Scope's comments, The discussion around play, I will make sure that older children are included specifically in that. And then my suggestion would be, given these priorities that are in the papers are there, and I think widely we're in agreement, I would suggest that a formal endorsement from the Scrutiny Board of those priorities to continue that partnership working would be valuable. And whether or not that takes the form of a letter from myself and Councillor Lennox, as requested earlier in the meeting, might be the way forward for that. People comfortable with that as an option? And obviously, as always, we'll circulate the letter after. Yes? Yep. Wonderful. Okay, good. Is that okay? I like to check I haven't broken any rules. So we will move on to the final item, which is the next meeting. And the next meeting of the Scrutiny Board will take place at 10:15 on Wednesday, the 5th of March. And please don't forget there'll be a pre-meeting for all members of the board, which will take place at 10. And with that, thank you very much for coming, and thank you for watching online.